today's episode, I speak to Joe Cecala, who is the founder of the Dream Exchange. This is the first majority Black-owned stock exchange, also the first stock exchange that will list companies that work for the greater good. Its purpose is to invest in companies that will be able to enhance humanity's ability to be pro-survival. We also discuss the man behind the dream and why the Dream Exchange is important to him. Joe shares the mindset that you need to succeed in doing something bigger than yourself. This is a wide-ranging conversation, so listen up. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout-out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Joe Cecala. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Judith. So nice to be on your program.
And you too. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm actually really enjoying the thaw in Chicago right now. The weather is fantastic. So seeing sunshine and balmy weather is really good for my soul. So I'm doing great.
How can you say that's for Brit? We only see that like 2 weeks in the summer if we're lucky.
Well, we're not too dissimilar in Chicago, but I think our 2 weeks are spread amongst 4 months. We get a day here and a day there over a very long period.
That's cool. Joe, before we begin, tell the audience who you are.
So I am, I'm Joe Cecala. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Dream Exchange, which is a new stock exchange in formation in the United States. And it's really dedicated to some very different things in finance, and hopefully you'll find out all about that. But we are a paradigm shifting way of investing money in new companies that we intend to bring to open our doors in about a year.
Wow. And what is the paradigm shift?
So the paradigm shift we're looking, well, there are multiple, but I would say the highest level goes alignment with our purposes. And the purpose of what we're doing is to see investment dollars go towards companies that have products and services that are imaginative first, but most importantly, that will enhance the experience of human beings to survive on planet Earth. Because it isn't always the finance evaluation that considers the broader interest of what the company is intending to do long term. So we have a very particular focus, and that focus is on what we use this expression in our group, pro-survival activities. So we want to invest our money in those things, and we're creating a stock exchange to better enable investors and companies with those ideas to meet and get their dollars. And the second real paradigm shift is that we are a majority Black-owned stock exchange, which is the first time in the history of the United States that is going to take place. So there's been a 230-year history of stock exchanges in the United States, nearly a 700-year history of stock exchanges, and never before in the U.S. has a Black investment group been in the ownership or control of a stock exchange, which really creates a very different dynamic for the United States, one where full participation from all segments of our society and our groups will be better available so that any entrepreneur from any walk of life, from any obscure corner of the United States, will have access to the capital markets so they can both invest and see their company grow and flourish and prosper. Those are the two primary purposes behind the Dream Exchange.
That's really fantastic. On two counts, really. One, the whole idea about working for the greater good is something that Maverick leaders everywhere want to do, because that makes sense. And I'm assuming that's what you mean by pro-survival, the greater good of humanity, as opposed to shelters and stuff, because the war's going to go crazy and kill everybody. I'm assuming that's what you mean by pro-survival.
That's precisely, in fact, the way you're expressing it, greater good. We actually do an evaluation process, and we believe that, historically, when people talked about business and finance and money, there is a current paradigm, and very often it involves what I believe, and I think many people have joined me in this, false ideas. One is, greed is good. It's a zero-sum game. It's a dog-eat-dog world. And it tends to be very adversarial. And what we have found is that actually the most successful companies, and really the ones that are longest lasting, they actually are producing things that help us to survive. And it isn't adversarial at all.
No.
And we're using words and changing the language where, kindness and compassion and sustainability and survival and love are incorporated into the business lives of people. Because if we are, what other purpose would we have in living if we're not? Then that's what we spend our time at work. We spend more time working than we do enjoying our families. So if we're not creating that greater good environment in our daily work lives, and we're not investing in that, we're really missing something as human beings. So it's a very, I think it's a very noble cause. It's a very big idea. And it's very difficult to argue with surviving versus succumbing as a concept. So we're getting a lot of really powerful acknowledgement in the world from what we're doing. In fact, I owe a debt of gratitude to Oxford University because they actually published our white paper and our theory behind what we're doing they have a handbook on initial public offerings, and we're published in chapter 9. And that was really one of the major milestones, which we were accepted for publication by one of the most prestigious universities in the world, acknowledging, these guys are onto something. So, I love what I'm doing. And that's really a full explanation, or a more detailed explanation, of the meaning behind, greater good and pro-survival.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I'm just thinking about the research that shows that the more society lifts up people of colour, the better society is as a whole. So if you want to save society, as it were, you need to lift up those at the bottom, because by lifting those at the bottom, you provide all, the wealth and the growth and expansion for everybody.
Yeah, that's the viewpoint. Our viewpoint is that you can't claim responsibility for something if you leave some larger portion of that thing you're trying to be responsible for totally left out. And it has just been a historical fact that we do not accept full responsibility for all the members of any particular group. The United States is a group. We have all of our citizens. And if there's a segment of our society that we choose not to really take full responsibility for, then we'll never be truly free. There'll always be some portion of our great grand experiment in freedom and self-governance that will be left behind. And to that degree to which we don't accept responsibility for our group members is an equal degree to which we lack freedom and the true dream, and there's our name, the true dream that is America, and the true dream that is a world with peace and happiness and prosperity for all of the people. All means all. It doesn't mean some. If you're drawing diagrams, it's sort of like,
it's a complete circle, isn't it?
Correct.
There's no segment taking it. This is so interesting, because I've literally this morning, just a few hours ago, done a podcast with somebody else about capitalism and what it is to recover from capitalism, and what does that mean. And we've had similar conversations about leaving nobody behind, and which suggests to me there's obviously a movement of people recognizing that going forward, which is great.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask you is, how do you feel about, is there any kind of, correlation is not the right word, but were you mindful of Tulsa and what happened in Tulsa, Black Wall Street, with what you're trying to achieve now?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, people, I think, generally never heard of Black Wall Street. And it's a very interesting, historical perspective, because when we first announced what we were doing, I've been doing this for 14 years. So
you're dedicated.
Yes. And it has been we're now fortunate that the awareness of things like Black Wall Street and the environments that were in fact created yet destroyed, somewhat deliberately in many ways, that were we to have that environment available today, the stake in society, the stake in our country would be increased. You find that people, when it's more than, in some circles, a lack of prosperity, it's bare survival. So we want people to thrive, and Black Wall Street was a thriving community. There were businesses, there were very large businesses. They actually had a series of airplanes that they could fly out of the area and be able to conduct in-person meetings long before air travel was even available. So the destruction of that very much it's an interesting case study, in that it proves that the spirit of, and I'm not a fan of the word capitalism. I don't like any isms, because I am a fan of capital, but we don't really have a purist society when it comes to capitalism. We don't have capital flowing into an environment where the best idea, in fact, always perseveres. What we have is a system that is blended. We do have certain aspects of socialism. We have certain aspects of an oligarchy. We have certain aspects of various economic systems that exist in our country. And the one that it works really well, is that when someone has a good idea, like Black Wall Street, and you provide them with the energy to expand a good idea, the capital, that good idea will become something that everyone uses to help themselves be better off. So, that was, it was interesting, because many of the early podcasts, maybe 8 or 10 months ago, that was really the first question was, well, is this a new Black Wall Street? Well, indirectly, there are correlations, but it is actually a stock exchange for all Americans. However, we have a long track record of working in the Black community, and I know ingenious Black entrepreneurs who had a very difficult time getting sufficient capital, and were they to get the funds to expand, there would be prosperity not only for them, but for the community. And when the community prospers, all of the citizens in that community will have an increased stake in the very society they live in. So, Black Wall Street is a great example of that.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because I suppose when you're asked that question, it can come heavily overlaid with a viewpoint. Do you know what I mean? Like, are you being asked that question because people are worried that there's going to be an uprising of Black wealth?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Or,
ironic.
that's not why I asked the question.
No, it's ironic. There's an irony to all of this right now. I'm on your show. I've been on major news networks and Forbes magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and it's funny because it's something like I said, I've been saying this for 14 years. So it's ironic that we've become so popular by virtue of the civil unrest of the past year.
Mm.
So that has actually catapulted the conversation to making it a higher necessity to do something. And the fear, I think, in general, exists throughout our society about a lot of different things. And one of them is, and I'm fearless in this question because I wouldn't be doing this. What would the world look like if we had everyone able to have their dreams actually come true? Well, if there are destructive people and their dreams come true, we're destroyed.
Mm.
So the common thing, the common, I guess, denominator that binds all of us is we're all trying to survive. We all want to do well. We all love our families. I joke about it sometimes because we have pets, and there's really no reason to buy a pet. George Carlin once joked that you're buying a tragedy. You will outlive your pet. Someday your pet you're going to have a cat for 10 or 15 years and then it's going to die. So why do it? Well, the fact is that we are uniquely human. We love one another. We're the only, creatures on this planet that do things that might seem illogical to all of the other species. We have kindness and compassion for the weakest. And when we lose sight of that, just because we've packed a briefcase and gone off to the business world, we're actually losing sight of our humanity and the importance of not being afraid of one another and learning that everyone has a contribution and that the bar is actually set quite low. Survive. That's a very low bar. We want thriving. We want prosperity. We want to build a society that people dream of. Like again, it's our name. So that by creating that, the fear tends to, especially in my conversations, I don't really encounter it very much because I'm not trying to threaten anyone. If it's good for one of us or one group of us, it's good for all of us. The easy way to look at it is, are you human? Good. This helps humans. So
don't go near Area 51 then.
except for those possible questions that tend to come up. But that's a very interesting way of putting it. If an alien spacecraft landed on Earth and started dropping bombs on Russia and the UK and the United States, I think you would fast find that we would be allies because we'd have a common enemy to our survival. So yeah, all kidding aside, it's a very interesting paradigm to look at, which is we're all in this together. So except for the potential of life on other planets trying to pilfer us in some way, we're definitely at least finding the common thread of humankind.
So tell me about this bill that's in Congress that you're writing.
Well, I'm very, very proud of our work. It's called the Main Street Growth Act. And I gave a little short shrift to my background. I'm a lawyer and a CPA, so which in Great Britain would be a chartered accountant.
Okay.
And I have a very long 30 plus year experience in finance and the laws pertaining to that in the United States. And what we discovered was that over time, the environment of stock exchanges has shifted into a very mechanical environment. It's very much using financial technology and computerization. And the smallest of companies really can't avail themselves of that because they really require a human being to look. You don't have to look very carefully to discover Apple Computer's worth $1 trillion. And if you want to buy their stock, it's a very easy evaluation. And tomorrow, if you want to sell it, you can sell it. But a small company really doesn't have a system available to it. So the Main Street Growth Act was an outgrowth. It wasn't necessarily even my idea. It was many, many people that were weighing in on how can we change the stock exchange marketplace in a way to benefit more participants. And about 5 years ago, I started working with various members of the U.S. Congress, and we hired some lobbying firms, and we weighed in. I'm not the sole author, but certainly I definitely contributed to the congressional staffs in creating the language, which is in this new law. And we wouldn't even be talking about it as a potential law right now, were the last 2 years of problems to not have occurred. So in 2018, the very same law that will be introduced shortly again into Congress was actually passed unanimously by the House of Representatives. And then it was a law that was attached in the U.S. Senate to the year-end appropriations bills. Well, if anyone remembers, at the end of 2018, there was a lame duck Congress. They were fighting over whether to spend money on the border wall in Texas, and the government actually shut down, and they didn't pass any laws at the end of that year. Right. So this is a very short law. It's 11 pages long. It won't independently pass. It'll be part of a larger group. Right. So even though we had unanimous consent of the Congress that year, it didn't pass. And then the last 2 years, there's been a preoccupation with, impeachments and COVID and civil unrest. So, but we expect things have sort of calmed down to a greater degree, and we expect it to move rather quickly through the Congress. In the United States, to get a Democrat and a Republican to agree that water is wet can be a tremendous task. So the fact that unanimously both parties align behind this change in the way a new type of stock exchange can function is quite impressive. And I'm proud of that fact, because I have been one of the people who's traveled to Washington frequently and met with our leaders to see this come to fruition. So it's a wonderful new law for the entire country. Coincidentally, I'll be able to open my new business, but I expect there'll be others. We're aware of at least 3 others that intend to use the new law to open a type of stock exchange like the Dream Exchange.
Okay, so does that mean that the stock exchange can't happen until that bill's passed?
No. Okay. So that is, we're creating a standard electronic stock exchange. Okay. And within that, we're also dedicating ourselves to the same exact purposes, except that those companies will be quite a bit larger. When the law passes, we'll actually be able to concentrate on very small companies. And to give orders of magnitude to what I'm saying, to become a listed company on the New York Stock Exchange, you need a minimum value, or what they call market capitalization, of $250 million. It's a very, very high bar. Right. So we're going to be concentrating on companies that have a value that is under $100 million, and many that may have less than 50. So the design of things is to create the entire ecosystem of companies so that the smaller companies are permitted the opportunity to get sufficient funds to grow. And that's where the 100 and 500 and multi-billion-dollar companies are born. I have an expression, and I say, the imagination is the place where money goes to be born. Because without, Steve Jobs in a garage, some 40 or some odd years ago, we would be missing some really survival-oriented communication systems. And perhaps someone would have taken some other direction, and maybe we'd have some version of it. However, he obviously created an optimal communication device, and in Apple computers, which is morphed into telephones, and we now take it for granted that I'm talking to you through my computer over the internet in another country. Without that idea being funded, the world would be a lesser place. And we want all those imaginative ideas to have an opportunity to flourish.
So, Joe, this sounds good. And I'm curious about the man behind the dream.
Well, I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. And this has truly been, the reason I'm laughing is it has been a tremendous labor of love for my career. And I got the idea about capital markets 25 years ago because I was the lawyer who represented 4 people who created a company called Archipelago. And Archipelago is really one of the first electronic environments where people could buy and sell stocks. And it grew to such a tremendous degree that by 2005, Archipelago merged with the New York Stock Exchange. And when, little known fact, when people are trading a stock today over the internet, there's a good portion of it that's used on the very Archipelago systems. And I saw this occurring, and it just occurred for me that there were other ways to use those types of systems to make the world a better place. Not merely a big company is not always equivalent to a good company. And that's me. And on a personal level, I have 6 children. I have pets. And my laughter comes from the fact that I probably could have done many, many other things to make a lot more money, which my wife would probably agree with. And, I don't think you're a real entrepreneur until at least one time you've put your payroll on your credit cards. So I've lived through that experience, and we are very fortunate now. But I think someone once said, after 30 years of hard work, I've become an overnight success. And that's kind of the phenomenon I'm experiencing. We have many, many, many supporters now. We will be a big company some days rather soon. I think what we have tapped into is something truthful, and it is an idea whose time has come. And that is really me. I love doing that, and I've been doing it for myself, and I really want to do it for other people. I want other people to have a similar opportunity. Like I said, on a personal level, that's really me. I was a military officer early in my career. I couldn't see. I wanted to fly helicopters, and the United States Army went, nah, that vision is not exactly a good thing for helicopters. So I crawled around in the woods for a long time. But I learned a lot about being a leader to small groups of people. And it really takes a lot of compassion and love amongst the people you're trying to lead. And that's, I guess, my personality is part of the Dream Exchange fabric. I actually love the people I work with. I end our meetings. We tell each other we love each other. It's comical because, I don't find there are a lot of environments like that, but that's really who I am as a human being. I just won't do it any other way. And I'm hoping that as we cast this ship into its voyage, that part of my personality and who I am as a person stays with everything we're doing for many, many years to come.
That sounds really good. Why is this so important to you? As you said, you could have done so many other things, and I assume to do this must have been quite a struggle. So why are you doing it?
So, a little bit of bordering the last question. So I grew up in an area in Chicago called North Austin, the Austin district in Chicago, which is a very racially integrated community. At least it was when I was a child. It's now mostly Black and Hispanic. But I grew up in an environment where all I had, my friends were not just they weren't just white people. I grew up with friends who were Black and Hispanic and Asian and our whole community of people, and I loved those people. I loved my childhood. And as I began progressing through my career, it became apparent to me that I'm white. It's very obvious that it's the one area in life. It's in the United States, it's very pronounced that you can instantly see another person and therefore often treat them differently. And even early in my law practice, I began to realize that using my talent or using my abilities and using my law license only for the purpose of self-betterment was very disturbing to me. It was not something that made me a happy person at night when I went home to my family. And I thought, I'm going to do something about this. So I began prosecuting civil rights cases. I was suing the government for violations of civil rights. And it was actually satisfying work because I felt as though I was doing something about it. I was doing something about the problems that I saw on the news instead of watching the news and complaining to my family and then going and living a life that would be, I guess, not doing anything about it and then complaining. I felt as though I was actually making a difference. And this is born because we're not going to solve the world's problems in a lawsuit. It would take an enormous army of lawyers with good intentions, right? So this was something that really, it just called to a vocation that I have in my life, which is helping others. I want to help people. I want the things I do every day to be helpful. And I think that common thread with me is it's in every entrepreneur's spirit. People want to create fun, exciting things that in some way are helpful and entertaining and make for a better and more joyful life for other people. Or people they tend to gravitate to doing that with their lives. And I find that people who aren't doing that, in fact, many of them with great careers, to be miserable. So I just didn't want to be miserable. I'm a very happy person, and the fact is, I'm not as wealthy or as successful by some people's measurements as one would think. But this is something that it is born from a pure. If it's selfish, it was purely selfishly that I wanted to do something with my life that made me happy. And I believe every entrepreneur is entrepreneuring because they view what they're doing in very much the same way. It may be a different product or service, but this happens to be what I was trained in life and what I can contribute to other people. So my largest purpose was, what can I do to contribute something that will help others and keep helping others even long after I'm gone, so my children and grandchildren will live in a better world.
Brilliant. So what advice could you give to someone who wants to do something that is for the greater good and is something that is way, way larger than themselves, like what you're doing? I mean, obviously it requires a certain mindset. What advice would you give?
Yeah. 2 words: never quit. Never quit. I use the word all before. Sometimes you can use a generic term, but never, the word is never. quit. No matter what idea you have, especially the biggest idea, you will find, if you have a big idea, that immediately people will encourage you to quit. You'll be labeled a fool. You'll be labeled someone who can't do it. You'll be labeled someone who, by others, that only see the barriers and obstacles rather than the possibilities. And what I do every day is I believe in myself. So I guess those two pieces of advice: never quit and believe in yourself. If you're starting something new, it isn't the barriers that will get you down. It's the purpose, where you have this great big idea and purpose, and then someone clobbers that purpose. And you just have to keep believing in yourself. And if we need you, whoever you are, we need you, because the truth is, were we to not have the Galileos and the people who changed the way we live because their idea was actually truthful, regardless of who criticized them. And in today's environment, we actually don't have very many people who come up with a really big idea and they're sent to the tower, So it will be difficult and it will be painful at times, but if you never quit and you keep believing in yourself, eventually, as big as your idea will be, it will be accepted as the new truth. And that's what I mean by a paradigm shift. If you have a big idea, it's definitely something that will need to persuade others to change their mind. And that's your job. That is the conductor's hat on the train you're driving, which is, you have the obligation for your big idea to never quit, believe in yourself, and to change everyone's mind that what you're doing is in fact the better thing to do. And if you keep in line with what we're saying, which is greater good, you can't lose. You'll never lose. And I'm better for having tried this, no matter how difficult it's been. I'm better for having put my life's energy into something that is worthy of my life, and we no longer really think that way. People don't talk this way. We don't talk about, someone once said this to me recently, they really enjoy reading the founding documents of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And what they said was, people don't talk that way anymore. And that, to me, isn't necessarily true, because the people I meet are talking that way. They're just speaking it in 21st century language. They're speaking it in, we can have a better world. We can have a better environment. We can save our planet and its resources. We can all survive well. Those are people that I love meeting. And those are the people I'm dedicating the Dream Exchange's existence to. So those would be my words of advice. Never quit, believe in yourself, and as big as your idea is, keep it moving forward to change the mind of the population, so that your big idea becomes as big as it possibly can be.
I love that. And it's so true, because there are like a million naysayers. And I think every time anybody says, oh, I've got this really new idea, this is really great, it's almost like the world comes out to go, no, can't happen, not going to work. It's like I wrote my book, and then I remember talking to someone really excited about, like, oh, the book's been published. I thought, well, people won't read it. It's like, that's not a thing to say.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's really strange. And then like I've got a magazine. It's like, and I was like, it's a year old, just over a year old, and I was doing it, and then people were like, it's a digital magazine, it's not print. Why would you want to do a magazine? It's like, I want all these different people, because I've got like a number of writers that write regularly, blah, blah. I guess I just want to collect mavericks to share their maverick knowledge to the world, and we can help change the world. It's like, well, that's a bit big, isn't it? It's like well, yeah, that's the point, And it's the same with the podcast. Well, how are you going to get somebody to to come on the podcast. Well, actually, it's not that difficult, but it's really funny because it's like, because the ideas are different, isn't it? Like with Maverick, I've defined it as willfully independent. I've made that decision. This is what I've decided it means, and this is what I'm going to talk about. And there are always going to be people who don't like that. It's a bit like when I'm just starting my second book now, but the first one, I do remember a few people saying, "So, are you going to interview other leaders and put down what they said?" And I'm like, no. This is a book about what I think leadership's about. Some people were really surprised, and they were like, "Well, don't you think you need to?" It's like, no, I don't need someone else's view, because my book's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing.
I'm so glad you can relate to that. I mean, I love your story. This is in the conversations I have, what you're talking about, fear. We want to create a fearlessness in people, like what you're saying right now, because, very often, especially in finance, people, it gets worse because it's not just the book and the magazine, which, by the way, I think are quite brilliant. But the fact is that in finance, one of the popular TV shows in America is the Shark Tank. And my experience for the last 30 years is people go and they talk to those who have some wealth and, investors, and they evaluate the idea. And the first thing they try to do is persuade you that it's not quite as valuable. And they're just going to tear it down a little bit. And then what happens at the end is, it's not quite as valuable. I'd like to invest in it, and I would really like to own, 90% of it.
If it's not valuable, why do you want so much?
Why exactly? Like if it's not valuable, you would choose not to invest at all. And the fact is, if it is valuable, why wouldn't we have fair and reasonable exchange? You wouldn't expect to go to a coffee shop and, that coffee, I love the coffee, but geez, I really only want to pay 10 cents for something that might be worth $3. Because what if when I taste the coffee, it's only worth $2.90 to me? And it's this bizarre conversation. And I start the conversation with, okay, you're trying to do something great. Your ideas are valid. Your viewpoint is valid. So validating another human being for what they think and what they feel. And if they really are someone who's saying, my idea can change the world, even if it's a little bit, it's going to make it a little bit better in the lane I'm in. That should be the thing we encourage in all people. Not so big as, Nelson Mandela, I'm going to butcher a quote of his, but I think there was a quote where someone was saying, who am I to think I could change the world? And he inverted that, saying, who are you not to? You can't waste your life, your talent, your contribution to the fabric of our world, because we wouldn't have Beethoven, for God's sake. He was deaf and the ninth child of an indigent family. He's actually my favorite composer. I listen to him daily. And I thank God that, he didn't quit, deaf as he was. Listeners, go listen to Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. I listen to it every day. It's inspiring. Just sit there and think about springtime. You'll get what I'm saying. We can't lose those contributions. And that's the whole point. Those ingenious people, the geniuses of our world, the people who have an imagination, who are actually dreaming of a better world, well, you among them are the people we need to encourage. Those people to be our leaders, to be those who are wealthy, to be those who are making the decisions in our society. Because if they believe that, not because it's a a silly dream, and not because it's something that is, airy fairy. And I'm not talking about being delusional. There's a pragmatism to it as well, which is, okay, I have this big dream. I'm approaching the dream exchange. How can I make that dream a reality?
That just
How can we
sounds
actually
so
bring it
wonderful.
about?
But
Yeah.
I just love that. I've got this dream. I'm going to the dream exchange. I mean, it's just perfect, isn't it? It's like what we do here. It's about, I believe that if we can enable everybody to have impact and influence, the world will be a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Because to do that, you have to behave and be a certain type of person, which is looking to the greater good.
Yeah.
If you lift everybody, how wonderful would the world be?
Yeah. And being brave about it. You talked about that fear. You can be more brave with more people encouraging your bravery. Okay. And we can't just rely on, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Very few people are actually confronted with that type of decision today, where what would you be willing to give your life for? And I guess, you asked me this earlier. I just happen to believe that every moment that you spend doing a thing, you're giving your life for that. Eventually you'll find that there will be an end of days for you. And if you have a dream and the only regret you'll have is finding yourself at an old age where you didn't really pursue all the things that you dreamt of. No one is on their deathbed saying, gee, I could have, really added that column of numbers better. And I'm an accountant, so I want everyone to get their products correct, but people regret the things that they didn't do, that they dreamt of and decided to give up on.
That is so true. The only thing I would say slightly different is I'm not so much into what would I die for. I'm more into what would I live for.
And I guess that's precisely the point, because we're actually not, we have such luxury. We're not actually faced with those life and death decisions any longer.
True. Yeah.
So it's a very tricky mindset. It's very tricky because we are all saying every day, what would I live for? If you live for your dreams, well, what an unstoppable life. No one will have a tombstone that reads, here lies Joe. His potential in life is fully intact.
Oh, that's so depressing. The funeral I would definitely cry at.
Right. You want to have something that you dream about and live for that dream. Get a vocation. Find something to dedicate living to, and that's really a part of everything we do.
That's fantastic. I think that's a great ending. I couldn't have hoped for a better ending to the podcast than that. That was almost like it was scripted or something. That was brilliant. Joe, if I find something else to talk to you about, would you come back?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This has actually been wonderful. I get a lot of financial mechanic podcasts and media like that. And sometimes we can lose sight of the full purpose, because it is a stock exchange. There are mechanics, there are technical questions, and why we're doing it. I would say this would be my concluding remark. I think we've figured out, for the most part, how to solve virtually every problem that confronts us surviving. We've figured out how, but we are now in a new age asking why. Why would you do it? What are the purposes behind living? And I love having this conversation. I would really welcome being able to come back and keep forwarding the purpose of what we're doing, because it's a great idea. It's an idea whose time has come. And I very rarely get a podcast interview that is so filled with the true purposes of what we're doing. So I love what you're saying, and I love what you're doing. And I would be more than happy to come back and visit as we make more progress.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe.
You're wonderful. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Joe as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.